I never thought a single smile could rewrite everything I thought I knew about desire. It was late afternoon, sunlight crawling through the blinds, dust motes dancing lazily in the quiet living room. I was perched awkwardly on the edge of the couch, notebook in my lap, pretending to study, while she leaned against the kitchen counter, sipping coffee like it was a secret she'd been keeping for years. She was older, mid-40s maybe, but the way she carried herself made time irrelevant. Her hair caught the light in streaks of bronze, and her laugh, low and soft, lingered in the corners of the room long after she stopped speaking. I shouldn't have noticed, but I did. Every tilt of her head, every flicker of her eyes toward me, it felt like it was meant to be studied, analyzed, memorized. "I'll teach you things your girlfriend can't," she said, brushing crumbs off her fingers, and my notebook nearly slipped to the floor. I stared, heart stuttering. It wasn't a joke, I realized. Her gaze was too steady, too knowing. I wasn't sure whether to be terrified or thrilled. She moved closer, just a step, but it felt like the room had shrunk. The subtle scent of her perfume, something floral, faintly cinnamon, tangled with the warm afternoon air. I felt the heat rise to my face before I could control it. "I mean," she added quickly, a hint of laughter breaking the tension, "you're serious about wanting to learn, right?" I nodded, because what else could I do? Words failed me. My hands curled around the notebook like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to a world that suddenly seemed unrecognizable. She tilted her head, watching me with that unspoken weight behind her eyes. I could feel it, the pull, the curiosity, the danger, and it was intoxicating. Her fingers brushed the edge of the table as she leaned forward, and my chest tightened. Every small movement of hers was deliberate, every breath measured, every smile a question I wasn't ready to answer. "I didn't mean to startle you," she whispered, almost inaudible. But the room felt louder, charged with something neither of us wanted to name. I wanted to tell her that this was wrong. That boundaries existed and rules existed, but my voice was gone, swallowed by the sudden ache of wanting something I wasn't supposed to want. Instead, I just watched her, memorizing the curve of her lips, the crease by her eyes, the way she shifted her weight from one foot to the other. Every little detail became a secret code I needed to decipher, and I realized I had already started. She laughed softly again, brushing her hair back over her shoulder. "You're quiet today," she said, voice teasing but gentle. "Usually, you've got a million things to say." "I like this version of you." I felt myself smile without thinking, and it shocked me that I wanted her to notice, that I craved the approval hidden behind her teasing. She was dangerous in a way I didn't want to resist, and maybe that was exactly why I couldn't. The silence stretched between us, thick and unbroken, until the faint buzz of my phone startled me. A text from someone I wasn't expecting, but I couldn't bring myself to look. Her gaze flicked toward the sound, and I caught it, an almost imperceptible smirk, the kind that said she knew exactly what was happening before I did. The moment shattered just slightly, but the tension lingered like smoke in the air. And then, as if the universe were conspiring with her smile, the doorbell rang. We both froze. Our eyes met for a heartbeat, and I saw a spark of something unspoken. Something had begun. The doorbell's echo had barely faded when she sighed, shaking her head like she wanted to erase the interruption. "I'll get it," she said, but her hand lingered on the doorknob, hesitant, as if even that small act carried weight. I stayed on the couch, pretending to scroll through my phone, but I couldn't stop watching the subtle lines in her face, the ones that told stories of years I wasn't part of, years I could only guess at. She wasn't just older, she carried a history. I'd seen the pictures on the mantel, a younger version of her, smiling beside a man whose absence now hung in the air like a half-forgotten note. A divorce. A long-term loss. A heart that had learned to hide but never fully closed. I felt a pang of something, guilt? Longing, and I hated how exposed it made me feel. I was 20, reckless in ways she wasn't, but drawn to her like gravity. Her life was complex, lived in layers, and mine was still mostly empty pages. Yet somehow, she made me feel seen in ways I didn't expect, ways I wasn't ready for. She returned, a small envelope in hand. "It's from your friend," she said casually, handing it over. But the casualness didn't stick. Her fingers brushed mine ever so slightly, a brush that lingered just long enough to be noticed, just long enough to be remembered. My chest tightened. I wanted to pull away, but I couldn't. We sat in silence for a beat. Then she muttered, almost to herself, "I never thought I'd be here again, feeling this." Her eyes darted away, scanning the room, settling on nothing. My stomach nodded. I had a crush before. Flirted, kissed, laughed with girls my age, but this was different. With her, every thought came with a warning: don't, shouldn't, impossible. Yet the warning only made the pull stronger. I wanted her words, her touch, her attention, small mercies I didn't deserve. You were married a long time?" I asked softly, unable to stop myself. She smiled, a little tight, a little wistful. "Long time ago. He was good in his way, but not what I needed." "Not this," she said, her gaze flicking toward me, then away. I knew she meant more than just the coffee in her hand. I swallowed hard. "And now?" I whispered. Her lips quirked, and she didn't answer. Not with words. Instead, she leaned closer, and I caught the faint scent of cinnamon again. The air between us hummed. My hand twitched, as if to reach for hers, but I stopped, pretending to adjust my notebook. Then, almost without thinking, our fingers brushed again. This time, we didn't pull away. A quiet charge passed through that simple touch, a silent acknowledgement that what was happening here was dangerous, maybe even wrong, but irresistibly real. The room felt smaller, warmer, and somehow heavier with possibility. Outside, the faint hum of traffic carried on as if nothing had shifted, but inside, everything had. She let out a soft laugh, barely audible, shaking her head. "You're harder to read than anyone I know." I smiled, but it was nervous, eager, trembling just beneath the surface. "Maybe I don't want to be read," I said. And in that unspoken tension, in the warmth of our fingers brushing and the weight of our shared silences, I realized something undeniable. We were already crossing lines we weren't supposed to, and neither of us could stop. The next evening, the air felt different, thicker, charged. I'd been replaying our brief touches, her gaze that lingered too long, her laugh that still echoed in my chest. I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe she was just kind. She appeared in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of tea. Steam curled lazily toward the ceiling, but I barely noticed. My heart was already somewhere else. "I thought you might like this," she said, voice low, casual, but the way she lingered near the door, it was deliberate. My fingers brushed hers as she handed me the cup. It was electric, a spark I didn't dare admit I felt. "I should, maybe go," I stammered, suddenly aware of the risk in the air, the impossible lines we were crossing. She smiled, but it wasn't the same. It was softer, hesitant. "Go? Or stay?" she asked, tilting her head, letting the question hang. Before I could answer, a knock at the back door made us both jump. She frowned. "It's probably my neighbor." "Sorry, I knew immediately it was more than a neighbor." The tension shattered, replaced with a sharp pang of guilt. She hesitated, then left the room. I could hear muffled voices, laughter I wasn't part of, and the faint slam of the back door. I wanted to chase her, to ask what that was, but I stayed frozen, clutching my mug. When she returned, she avoided my eyes. Her movements were smaller, careful, almost guarded. Something had intruded, and the invisible thread connecting us had been frayed, if only slightly. She started, then stopped, shaking her head. "Never mind." I leaned forward. "No, tell me. Please." She looked at me finally, a shadow of conflict passing through her eyes. "I can't," she whispered. What's happening, it's dangerous. Not just for us." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat growing. I know it is. But I can't stop thinking about you." My voice cracked slightly, betraying me. She flinched, like my words had opened a wound. You shouldn't. She broke off, trailing off into silence. My chest tightened. A pause stretched between us, heavy, suffocating. Then, as if testing the limit, I moved a fraction closer. Her gaze lifted, and for a heartbeat, it was just us again, the world outside erased. And then, almost by accident, our knees touched. Just barely. But the brush sent a shock through me, and I saw her inhale sharply, bite her lip, and glance away. She stood abruptly, turning toward the kitchen, pretending to do something, anything, to break the moment. I wanted to follow, to insist, to close the distance, but I didn't. I sat frozen, heart racing, aware of the tension stretching taut between us. Dangerous, impossible, thrilling. And just as I opened my mouth to speak again, my phone buzzed. A text from my friend, the one whose stepmom she was. I didn't dare look. My pulse spiked with dread. Her hand brushed mine again, barely, almost apologetic, almost a dare. Her eyes caught mine, silently asking the question we both feared to answer. Everything was about to change. I hadn't meant to stay so late. The sky had darkened into a bruised purple, streetlights flickering through the blinds, and yet there she was, still moving around the kitchen as if the day hadn't ended at all. I didn't expect anyone else tonight, she said casually, though her voice trembled slightly. Her eyes flicked to the clock, then back to me. She didn't meet my gaze fully, and I noticed the tension in her shoulders, the slight bite of her lip. Something was off. Before I could ask, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, froze, then shoved it into her pocket with a tight laugh. I wanted to ask, but I hesitated, knowing the wrong word could shatter the fragile thread between us. I can't do this, she whispered suddenly, spinning toward me. Her hands clenched the counter edges like she needed to anchor herself. You don't understand what this is, what we are. I shouldn't even be here. I know, I said, voice low. I know it's complicated, impossible. But I can't. My words stumbled, caught in the gravity of her gaze. I can't stop thinking about you. She inhaled sharply, as if the air itself had become too heavy. You shouldn't. I can't let you. It's dangerous. I don't care about dangerous, I blurted and then froze. Her eyes widened, searching mine for hesitation, for a lie, but there was none. For a long moment, she just looked at me, trembling ever so slightly. I could see the conflict etched into her face, fear, desire, shame. The weight of years, of history I could never fully know, pressed down on her like gravity. And still, something in her eyes flickered, a recognition, maybe even longing. She started, then broke off, shaking her head. I can't let it go this far. My chest ached. Every word, every breath seemed charged, electric. I wanted to cross the space between us, to close the distance, to prove that none of this mattered as long as we were here, now. Then, the sound of a car pulling up outside made both of us jump. She stiffened, glanced toward the window, and my stomach dropped. Whoever it wasn't supposed to be here. I have to, she whispered, voice tight. I need a moment. Her fingers brushed mine, almost reluctantly, but the contact set my skin on fire. Her hand lingered a second too long, and I didn't pull away. I wanted to memorize that touch, that hesitation, that silent plea hiding behind it. I began, but she held up a finger, shaking her head. Not yet. Don't. The knock at the door came then, sharp, insistent, slicing through the fragile bubble between us. She froze, eyes wide, and I realized, whatever we were, whatever had been building, it was about to be interrupted. Our fingers still brushed, and I could feel the tension coiling tighter than ever, like a wire ready to snap. My pulse hammered in my ears, and in that suspended moment I knew everything was about to change, one way or another. And then, before anyone could speak again, the door creaked open. The door swung open, and instead of the expected neighbor or friend, it was him, my friend, laughing like nothing was wrong, backpack slung over one shoulder. My stomach dropped, a sudden lead weight pressing against my chest. "Hey, thought I'd drop by," he said, grinning. "Hope I'm not interrupting anything." His eyes flicked toward her, and then froze. Recognition hit. The way he looked at us wasn't casual, wasn't amused. It was sharp, calculating, hurt. She stiffened immediately, the color draining from her face. "Oh, I didn't expect you back so soon," she stammered. Her voice was tight, controlled, but the tremor betrayed her. I wanted to disappear. To melt into the floor. My heart was pounding, my throat dry. The twist, the betrayal, wasn't his fault, but suddenly, the fragile bubble we had built was shattered. He glanced between us, then let out a sharp laugh, the kind that cuts. "Right, this is awkward. Didn't realize I was intruding on, whatever this is." Her hands clenched the counter edges, nails digging in. It's not what you think," she said, her voice cracking despite her effort to stay composed. I wanted to speak, to explain, to calm things down, but words failed me. I could see the hurt in his eyes, the trust we'd bent without thinking, and I knew that no explanation could make it right, not yet. She moved closer to me, almost instinctively, as if my presence could shield her. Her hand brushed mine for a fleeting second, a silent lifeline, but the electricity of it was swallowed by the room's tension. I didn't mean for you to see anything," I whispered, voice hoarse. "You didn't mean for me to see?" he snapped. "But I did. And now, what are we even doing here?" His gaze wasn't accusatory, exactly, but it carried the weight of betrayal and confusion. She swallowed, lips pressed together. "It's complicated," she admitted, voice small, trembling. "Nothing is simple." "I never wanted, then why?" he cut in sharply. "Why are you?" His words hung, unfinished, suspended like shards in the air. I could feel her trembling beside me, could feel the hesitation in every line of her body. She looked at me with pleading eyes, as if asking silently for some impossible choice. My chest tightened. I wanted to protect her, wanted to claim her in a world that suddenly felt impossibly small. And yet the risk had doubled, tripled. The stakes were no longer about us alone. Our secret, our fragile, unspoken pull, was exposed, teetering on the edge of judgment, scandal, heartbreak. I wanted to take her hand, to close the distance, but the tension made it feel like we were standing on a cliff. One misstep and everything would fall apart. She brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear, eyes darting nervously. "We'll figure this out," she whispered, almost to herself, almost to me. But even as she said it, the truth was clear, nothing could stay the same. The rules had changed. And in that instant, I realized that the next move, my next move, could either destroy everything or finally bring us together. Her fingers grazed mine one last time before the room fell into silence, heavy and impossible. The room felt impossibly small, the air thick with tension, unspoken truths, and the weight of everything we hadn't said. My friend's glare had softened slightly, but the damage was done, nothing could return to how it had been before tonight. She stepped closer to me, just enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off her body, the faint scent of cinnamon lingering in the air. Her hand hovered near mine, trembling, and for a heartbeat, I thought she might pull away. I can't pretend anymore," she whispered, voice low, shaky, but determined. "Whatever this is between us, it's real. And I don't care about the consequences right now." I felt my chest tighten, my heart hammering. Every instinct screamed caution, fear, the knowledge that the world outside our little bubble would never understand. But the pull, hers, mine, undeniable, was too strong to resist. "I don't care either," I said, voice hoarse, trembling despite myself. "I've tried to ignore it, to step back, but I can't. You're the only thing I can think about." Her eyes searched mine, desperate, vulnerable, exposed in a way that left me breathless. Then, as if the decision had been made silently between us, she closed the distance. Our fingers entwined, tentative at first, then with growing certainty. The contact was electric, grounding, terrifying, and beautiful all at once. My friend shifted in the doorway, a silent witness to the boundary we'd crossed, but neither of us cared. For a few moments, nothing existed beyond us. The world had narrowed to the press of her hand against mine, the warmth of her body close to mine, the whispered rhythm of our shared breaths. "I know this is messy," she murmured, voice almost breaking. "I know it's wrong in so many ways. But I can't stop myself either." I nodded, swallowing hard, my own voice catching. "Messy, yes. Wrong, maybe. But I don't care. Not anymore." We laughed softly, nervously, as if trying to ease the tension that still lingered, but our smiles didn't hide the truth. We had crossed a line we could never fully erase. The pull, the danger, the risk, it had made this real, raw, human. Outside, the faint hum of cars continued, the world carrying on as if oblivious to the storm inside this room. And yet inside, something had shifted irreversibly. Something had begun. We stood together, hands still linked, breathing in sync. And in that quiet, fragile space, I realized we understood each other in a way no one else could. Every hesitation, every flicker of doubt, every silent longing had led us here. The moment stretched, heavy and luminous, until the sound of a phone buzzing cut through the room. A reminder that the world outside, responsibilities, consequences, judgments, was still waiting. She glanced at it, then back at me, and a small, almost sad smile tugged at her lips. "We'll deal with it later," she said softly. I squeezed her hand tight, desperate to hold on to this fleeting perfection. "Later," I echoed. And in that moment, messy, imperfect, thrilling, we were together. But the night was far from over. The morning after felt strange, almost fragile. Sunlight filtered through the blinds in gentle slats, cutting across the room where we had stayed up far too late, tangled in the consequences of our choices. She sat across from me at the small kitchen table, a cup of coffee in her hands. Steam curled upward, but it barely seemed to warm the weight between us. For a moment, we simply looked at each other, no words, just the quiet acknowledgement of everything that had happened. "I don't regret it," she said finally, voice soft, but steady. She traced the rim of her mug with a finger, and I could see the faint tremor in her hands. "Not for a second." I wanted to argue, to downplay the chaos we'd created, the risks we'd taken, but the truth was already clear in her eyes and mirrored in my own. I didn't regret it either. Not the tension, not the fear, not the stolen glances or the touch that had lingered far too long. It had been real, and for the first time, it had been ours. There were still questions, of course, complications we hadn't solved, judgments waiting just outside the door. But the hardest part had been answered. We had crossed the line together, and we had survived the pull, the temptation, the danger. And in doing so, we had found something that mattered more than the rules, more than fear. She reached across the table then, her fingers brushing mine in a casual, almost gentle way, but the simplicity of it carried a promise. "We'll figure out the rest," she whispered. "Together." I smiled, a little nervous, a little awed. The room was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of the city outside, the faint scent of coffee, and the unspoken weight of our shared history. For a moment, I let myself imagine the future, messy, complicated, filled with stolen afternoons, whispered secrets, and touches that carried meaning far beyond the ordinary. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing that mattered ever was. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "I still can't believe we did it," she said. "I mean, you and me. Against everything." "Yeah," I said, hard hammering. "Against everything. But somehow, it feels right." And it did. Messy, impossible, wrong to the world outside, but right to us. The quiet stretched a moment longer, and in it, I realized something else, that love, in its purest form, didn't wait for permission. It didn't ask for approval. It simply existed, in the brush of fingertips, in the shared breath of a room, in the small, perfect moments that made the rest of the world fade away. We leaned back in our chairs, hands still almost touching, and let the silence hold us for a while. The storm had passed, but the air was still charged with what had come before, and what might come next. "Did you enjoy the story?" What kind of stories would you like to hear next?